So I have a question, but do you know what Bethlehem means? Bethlehem means house of bread. House of bread. Did you know that when Jesus showed up in John chapter 6, he said, I am the bread of life. I am the living bread which came down from heaven. Anyone eats of this bread, he will live forever. And the bread that I shall give is my flesh, which I shall give for the life of the world. He literally is talking about his body, and he's saying that he is going to give his life, his flesh, for the life of the world. Did you know in Genesis chapter 41, all the face of the entire earth came to Joseph because he is the only one who had grain during this famine time? It says, so all countries came to Joseph in Egypt to buy grain because the famine was so severe in all the land. So in Genesis chapter 41, Joseph is a type of Jesus Christ. He is a typology of Jesus Christ. So everything we're reading about here is foreshadowing Jesus. In Genesis 47, we see that all the people gave their livestock to Joseph, and Joseph gave them bread in exchange for all of their things. These people literally gave everything that they had, and Joseph paid for those things with bread. These people during the famine recognize that they need to be saved, because if they do not have bread, then they are going to perish. And so they say, hey, Joseph, buy us and our land for bread, and we and our land will be servants. And so they are saying that they are willing to give everything that they own so that they can have bread. The bread is going to keep them alive. In verse 20, it says, then Joseph bought all the land. He bought everything. And do you know what he paid for it with? He paid for everything with bread. And after these people were bought and paid for by bread, because Joseph gave them grain, when he gave them grain, these people no longer had themselves. They no longer had cattle. They no longer had land, because they gave all of those things to Joseph so that they could be saved. And so after all of that, they're not mad with their decision. They say, hey, Joseph, you have saved our lives. And then they're like, hey, let us serve you. These people recognize that they were saved because of what Joseph did. Joseph bought all of their stuff with bread. And these people weren't upset at it. Even though Joseph now had possession, it was in control of all of their stuff, they were not disgruntled. They were looking at Joseph and they were like, hey, how can we serve you? Thank you so much for saving our lives. How can we serve? It's absolutely incredible. In Genesis 22, Abraham said that God will provide himself the lamb. He's providing himself the lamb, which goes to 1 Timothy chapter 2, where it says there is one God and one mediator between God and man, the man Christ Jesus, who gave himself. Jesus gave himself. So all the way back in Genesis 22, when Abraham said that God will provide himself the lamb, that was fulfilled when Jesus literally gave himself. So when we go back to the house of bread, which is where Jesus was born, and we look at this all over again, where Jesus says, I am the bread of life, and I am the living bread which came down, and he says, I shall give my flesh, which I shall give for the life of the world. You now start to go back to Genesis 41, and you see how when Joseph was buying everything with grain, you see how that is a foreshadow, anticipatory of what Jesus would do on the cross. In John 3:16, it says, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. And so everything that you read back in the Old Testament in some way, shape, or form is ultimately pointing back to what Jesus did on the cross. Everything. The message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to those who are being saved, it is the power of God.